It doesn't happen overnight. One day, you're a man with purpose, confidence radiating from every decision. Next, you're apologizing for taking up space in your own life. You've become invisible to women who once noticed you. Friends stop calling. Your own reflection feels like a stranger. But here's the truth most men never realize. It starts with small choices you don't even notice. Tiny compromises that feel reasonable at the moment. A little less backbone here, a little more people-pleasing there. And before you know it, you've traded your masculine edge for the illusion of safety. The decline is silent, but the consequences scream. And it starts with small choices you don't even notice, until it's too late. Low-value behavior doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It creeps in through everyday moments, eroding the respect others have for you. And worse, the respect you have for yourself. Here are 7 signs you're slipping into low-value territory, and the uncomfortable truth about what each one really means. If you value truth over comfortable lies, hit that like and hype buttons immediately. Subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know where my strongest, most aware men are tuning in tonight. Sign 1. You apologize for existing. You've turned sorry into punctuation. Deep down, this isn't politeness. It's a desperate attempt to shrink yourself small enough that no one can find fault with you. You're operating from a place of assumed guilt, as if your presence is inherently problematic. Every "sorry for bothering you" and "sorry if this is stupid" broadcasts insecurity so loud it drowns out anything valuable you might have to say. Watch yourself tomorrow. Count how many times you apologize for things that aren't your fault. For speaking up in meetings, for having opinions, for taking up space on the sidewalk. You text, "if that's okay," after every suggestion, turning statements into questions. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. This isn't consideration, it's self-erasure. The psychology here is devastating. You've internalized the belief that your natural state is wrong. You apologize for your voice being too loud, your laugh being too much, your ideas taking up time. You preface every contribution with an apology, as if you need permission to exist in the conversation. You apologize for calling when you need something. You apologize for texting back too quickly or too slowly. You apologize for having preferences, for needing space, for feeling tired. You've turned every human need into something that requires an apology. You apologize for taking the last piece of pizza, for choosing the restaurant, for having to leave early. But here's what's really happening. Every apology trains people to see you as an inconvenience. You're teaching them that your presence is something to tolerate, not enjoy. You're conditioning everyone around you to expect less from you because you've positioned yourself as perpetually in debt to their patience. The most damaging part? You've stopped distinguishing between times when an apology is warranted and times when you're just apologizing for being human. You've created a default setting of guilt that follows you everywhere. But apologizing for existing is just the surface. The real problem runs deeper. It's what you're actually seeking when you do it. Sign 2. You chase validation instead of purpose. Your self-worth has become a popularity contest. While high-value men build something meaningful, you're refreshing social media, counting likes, and measuring your day by how many people approved of your thoughts. You've confused attention with respect, agreement with admiration. The psychology here is brutal. You've outsourced your identity to people who barely know you. You post something and check back every 10 minutes. You change your opinions based on which ones get better reactions. You fish for compliments by downplaying your achievements, hoping someone will contradict you. This probably isn't very good, but becomes your default introduction to everything. You need others to tell you you're valuable because you've forgotten how to feel it yourself. You modify your stories based on which versions get laughs. You check who viewed your profile obsessively. You craft texts for maximum response, deleting and rewriting until you sound like someone else entirely. Your conversations become performances where you're both the actor and the desperate audience member hoping for applause. But it goes deeper than social media. You choose restaurants based on what will impress others, not what you actually want. You buy clothes to get reactions, not because you like them. You share achievements looking for praise, then feel empty when you get it, because deep down, you know you're performing for approval, not expressing authentic success. You've turned every interaction into a referendum on your worth. A slow response to your text becomes evidence that you're not important. A lack of engagement on your posts becomes proof that you're not interesting. You've made other people's reactions the metric for your value, which means your self-esteem lives and disappears at their whim. The validation chase is exhausting because it never ends. Each hit of approval only lasts until you need the next one. You're an addict, and the drug is other people's opinions. High-value men know their worth before they walk into the room. You discover yours by reading the room's reaction to you. But validation seeking is obvious to everyone except the person doing it. What's less obvious is how you handle conflict. But here's what most men never realize. The behaviors that feel like self-protection are actually self-destruction. And this next pattern is the silent destroyer of masculine energy. If you recognize it, the damage might already be done. Sign 3. You accept disrespect and call it peace. You've confused keeping the peace with keeping your dignity. Real talk. You let people cross lines you should have drawn in concrete. You smile when someone interrupts you for the third time. You laugh when the joke is on you, even when it stings. You've convinced yourself that taking the high road means taking whatever people dish out. That's not wisdom. That's fear dressed up as maturity. The psychology behind this is devastating. You believe that any conflict means you've failed as a person. So you absorb disrespect like a sponge, telling yourself you're being the bigger man. But here's what's really happening. Every time you swallow an insult, you teach people how little they need to respect you. You don't set boundaries because you're terrified they'll leave. You don't call out bad behavior because you might be called difficult. You accept being the backup plan, the second choice, the guy they call when they need something. You've trained everyone around you to treat you like you're optional. You let people cancel on you last minute without consequence. You accept half-hearted apologies for serious wrongs. When someone disrespects your time, your space, or your worth, you make excuses for them instead of making it clear that behavior won't fly again. You tolerate friends who only reach out when they need favors. You stay quiet when colleagues take credit for your work. You laugh off insults and call it being a good sport. Here's the brutal truth. Every person in your life has learned exactly how much disrespect you'll tolerate before you push back. And that number keeps getting higher because you mistake endurance for strength. You think you're choosing your battles wisely, but you've stopped fighting any battles at all. Peace at the expense of self-respect isn't peace, it's surrender. And surrender becomes a habit faster than you think. But tolerating disrespect is just one way you abandon yourself. The next sign cuts even deeper. Sign 4. You abandon your standards for attention. You've turned your principles into negotiation points. High-value men have non-negotiables. You have, it depends. You said you wanted someone who shares your values, but when she shows up with different ones, you convince yourself values don't matter that much. You compromised on what you said was important, then wondered why nothing feels authentic anymore. This isn't just about relationships. It's about everything. You wanted friends who challenge you, but you settle for people who just tolerate you. You had career goals, but you lowered them when they required uncomfortable conversations. You had standards for how you wanted to be treated, but you dropped them the moment maintaining them felt inconvenient. The psychological trap here is thinking that flexibility makes you adaptable. But there's a difference between being open-minded and being spineless. When you abandon your standards for attention, you're not being reasonable. You're being desperate. And desperation has a smell that repels quality people while attracting those who love easy targets. You tell yourself you're compromising, but you're the only one doing it. You lower your expectations for physical fitness, personal growth, moral character, whatever it takes to keep people around. You accept friends who drain your energy because having someone is better than having no one. You date people you're not attracted to because rejection terrifies you more than settling does. Watch how quickly you bend when someone attractive shows interest. Suddenly, your deal breakers become preferences. Your must-haves become nice-to-haves. You reshape yourself to fit their world instead of finding someone who fits yours. You become a chameleon, changing colors so fast you forget what you originally looked like. People don't respect what you don't protect, and you've stopped protecting almost everything that matters. Your standards were the foundation of your self-respect, and you've been selling them piece by piece for the temporary comfort of not being alone. But giving up your standards is still not the deepest cut. What comes next reveals something even more troubling. And if you thought abandoning your standards was bad, this next pattern is where boys pretend to be men. Most never recover from this mistake, unless they see it now. Because what you're about to hear changes everything. Sign 5. You explain yourself like a boy, begging for permission. You turn every decision into a dissertation defense. A high-value man says, "I'm doing this." You say, "So I was thinking maybe I could possibly do this thing, but only if you think it's okay. And here are 17 reasons why it makes sense." You've turned simple choices into elaborate justifications, as if your right to live your life requires approval from a committee. The psychology here is terrifying. You're still operating like a child asking mommy and daddy if you can have a cookie. You explain your job change, your weekend plans, your dinner choice, your opinion on movies. You provide evidence for decisions that need no defense. You're not seeking input. You're seeking permission to exist as an adult. Watch how you communicate decisions. "I think I'm going to," instead of "I'm going to." "I was wondering if, maybe," instead of "I will." Does that make sense? After every statement. You're not discussing, you're auditioning for approval. But it gets worse. You explain your boundaries as if they need justification. "I can't make it because," followed by a detailed explanation of why your time matters. You explain your opinions as if having thoughts requires a defense. You explain your emotions as if feeling anything needs academic backing. You over-explain your purchases, your choices in clothes, your decision to go to the gym or skip it. You justify taking time for yourself as if self-care is selfish. You explain why you deserve respect instead of simply expecting it. Every preference becomes a presentation. Every boundary becomes a debate. The most damaging part? You've trained people to expect these explanations. They know you'll provide a full justification for any decision, so they feel entitled to question everything you do. You've become your own prosecutor, building cases against your right to autonomy. Adult men inform. Boys explain. And you've been explaining yourself into irrelevance, turning your autonomy into a performance that nobody asked to see. But over-explaining is just the beginning. The next sign reveals how you've completely misunderstood your role. Sign 6. You solve instead of lead. You've become an emotional janitor. When people come to you with problems, you immediately start fixing, suggesting, analyzing, offering solutions they didn't ask for. You think this makes you helpful. What it actually makes you is exhausting. You've confused being needed with being valued. And those are not the same thing. Here's the brutal psychology. You solve because you're terrified that listening isn't enough. You believe your worth comes from your utility, so you turn every conversation into a repair job. Someone shares frustration, and you start troubleshooting. Someone shares fears, and you start strategizing. You never just witness their experience because you don't trust that your presence alone has value. High-value men know when to fix and when to just be strong. You panic when you can't offer immediate solutions, as if silence means failure. You exhaust people with your need to make everything better, never realizing that sometimes they just needed you to understand, not to act. But it goes deeper than conversations. You solve your way through relationships, thinking that if you can just fix enough problems, people will need you too much to leave. You become the guy who handles everything: logistics, emotions, conflicts, decisions. You take on burdens that aren't yours because you're addicted to being indispensable. You fix her mood when she's upset instead of letting her feel her feelings. You solve workplace drama that doesn't involve you. You jump into family conflicts with strategies and solutions when people just wanted someone to listen. You manage everyone's emotions because you can't handle your own discomfort with their discomfort. The most damaging part? You're not actually leading. You're following their emotional state. Real leaders create calm in chaos. You create exhaustion by trying to eliminate every problem before it can naturally resolve. You're a reactive fixer, not a proactive leader. You're not helping. You're managing their emotions because you can't handle your own discomfort with their discomfort. That's not leadership. That's emotional servitude. But even solving everything for everyone isn't the final blow to your value. The last sign is the one that seals your fate. But this final sign is the one that separates men from boys permanently. And if you see this in yourself, the consequences are deeper than you imagine. Because once this pattern takes hold, everything else becomes impossible. Sign 7. You stop growing. Because it's too late. You've declared your potential closed for business. You see younger men improving themselves and think, if only I had started earlier. You see successful people and assume they had advantages you didn't. You've turned your age into an excuse and your past into a prison. The psychology here is the most dangerous of all. You've decided that growth has an expiration date. This isn't wisdom about limitations. This is fear disguised as realism. You don't try new things because you might fail publicly. You don't develop skills because you might not be immediately good at them. You don't change because change requires admitting you were wrong before, and your ego can't handle that level of honesty. You've convinced yourself that improvement is for people younger, luckier, or more naturally gifted. You say, it's too late, when what you really mean is, it's too hard. You've stopped believing you can become more than you are, so you've stopped trying. And when you stop trying, everyone around you feels it. The most low-value thing a man can do is give up on himself while still breathing. Because when you stop growing, you start shrinking. And shrinking men inspire no one. So now you know the 7 signs. You've seen the patterns that transform confident men into shadows of themselves. The real question isn't whether you recognize these behaviors. It's how many are already woven into your daily life. Because becoming low value isn't an event. It's a slow erosion by 1,000 small choices. Which ones are you making right now? Right now? Right now? Right now?